boy, Richard, I cannot believe Fife Rents have actually smashed through the £830 a month barrier. That is unbelievable. Why on earth is that? There's reason behind this, and I'm just talking to the Instagram and TikTok crew while we're intros were running, and just to explain to them what's going on here. So this is all about, I mean, to be honest, are landlords generally just profiteering off of this, Richard? What's your thoughts to this?
No, and I think that's not the case. And I know a lot of people have that misperception, but the private rented sector, for both Fife landlords and Fife tenants, at the moment, they're really facing immense challenges. And as we all know, well, we know, some watching might not know, that there is a shortage of available properties for rent, and it's putting a lot of pressure on renters and really under a lot of significant pressure at the moment. We put property on the market and there's such a shortage and the demand just far outstrips it, and we're inundated with people. And we've looked recently, and you can see from average UK rents, back in, and remember, this is the UK average.
This is quite a startling statistic about the average UK rents. So what is that?
So the average UK rent in 2021 was £1,381, and in 2023 it's £1,706. So I mean, that's an increase of 23.5%, which is a big jump. And with there being that immense shortage of properties, and then this influx in tenant demand, and then this increase in rent, it's a lot on tenants. So people may obviously look at the landlords, but there's a lot of issues for the tenants and the landlords in this situation.
Okay, so where does that leave us then? I'm just about to put some numbers in Bank of England inflation calculator, just to let us see where we are right now. This is quite interesting. According to the Bank of England inflation calculator, 1627. According to the Bank of England inflation calculator, rents should be round about 1627. So in the UK, if you take 1381 and put it into their calculator to apply inflation between the period from 2021 to now, so which means the average UK rent is just over by an extra £79 a month. Now, £79 a month, as opposed to where it should have been, represents 4.6% more than what inflation should be. So while you see an increase of 23.53%, in actual fact, the 23.53% is driven more by inflation than it is actually by landlords profiteering. Have I just finished this show?
Let's just draw a line under it.
And actually finish this show, and we're done. Because effectively, you know, there is a real thing out there about, you know, landlords are all profiteering off of this. They're making an absolute fortune out of this, and it's no fair. But when you look at the inflation calculator, normal rents with inflation applied in that figure from the 2021, which everybody thought was perfectly acceptable for the average UK rent at that time, now all of a sudden is only 4.6% more, or whatever I just said. But they're saying 23.53%, but it's actually inflation that's taken into account and absorbed all that increase.
Yeah, and I mean, like you see, you could just state that and kind of draw a line under it and be like, well, there you go. But I think it's important that we look. I did mention there, obviously, we're looking at UK. We're talking about UK as a whole. I think it's important that we break it down and look at areas, and look at Fife itself and areas within that as well, which I know we're going to do today anyway. So.
Okay, so we'll then break it down from then. Where are we?
Let's have a wee look closer at home, and let's obviously remember, like, despite these rent controls and things that have been brought in by the Scottish Government, the average rent for homes coming on the market in Fife and in the Fife area in 2021 was £764 a month. Okay, so that was your average for Fife back in 2021. Now in 2023, it's £834 a month, which is a fair bit of a jump. Now we could break that down even further. As I say, within Fife itself, we've got areas like Cooper. So back in 2021, Cooper's average rent was 680. It's now £779. If we look at the East Nuke, it was £712 back in 2021. It's now up to £920 average rent. If we look at Glenrothes, so Glenrothes is 2021's rent average was £592, and that's now up to £676. Leaving was £516 average rent in 2021. It's now £641. And then Andrews finally, now obviously rents are always higher, but the average rent in 2021 was £1,369. It's now up to £1,472.
But so if we drill down into this, I tell you what, let's look at the inflation calculator applied to these figures for Fife.
Let's do it.
Now, I'm going to talk about. I've got some information about other letting agents in other areas, like the Glasgow area, West Coast, and also the Edinburgh area as well, which was actually quite revealing, and also for us in Fife. But let's talk about this and drill down to these numbers and imply inflation. So I'm just going to share with everybody on the screen here the Bank of England inflation calculator. Everybody can go to this and actually work this out. This is the Bank of England inflation calculator. Can everybody see that? Okay.
Yes, that's on the screen
down here. So let's take the average rent, you were saying, in 2021 of 764, and in 2020
as a whole.
And imply inflation up to today. £900. And what are we
getting? So that's
what
it should be, according to inflation. It should be there.
And we've got 834 as the average rent, actually, the average rent being charged. So the average rent being charged today is actually £834, but it's still less than inflation. It's quite significantly less. So 834 minus the 900 is £66 a month in somebody else's pocket, as opposed to what inflation should be, which is effectively around about another £800 a year people are saving. So who's taking that hit? It's the landlord, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's quite interesting. So anybody can do that by just going into the Bank of England inflation calculator and look at their rents and see where that is. But that for me is actually quite a revelation, because on the face of it, when you look at 764 per month, you think, wow, that's a big chunk. But in 2021, it was okay. It was acceptable. It was deemed as, an acceptable level for your income. And then it's now up at 834 in Fife. And yet there's some panic at inflation and rents are out of control. But the rents aren't out of control in comparison to inflation. Inflation is a lot higher than the average rent that we've just calculated now, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've been looking at this over the last wee while, Jim, but we're breaking it down a lot this week as well, and it become really apparent that rents are not in comparison to inflation. And we can see that a lot of people are accusing landlords of this widespread profiteering and things, and that's not actually the case. And as usual, the devil's in the detail, really, and we've obviously demonstrated that there as well.
So here's one that we looked at, and I can't show it on the screen because there was a lot of data in there. But our average rent out of the first 50 properties we actually took on. So the first 50 properties we actually took on, and it went back as far as 2010, 2011, and 2012. So these are all properties that we took on since that time, and we've still got in our books. So we thought we'd go right back to the very beginning and find out what the rent was when we first took it on, which was very, very affordable, according to everybody. So we took that, and then what we did was we took today's rent that people are getting charged. And then we also took the original rent and put it in the inflation calculator. Now, here's a revelation. Our average rent out of these 50 properties is £425, which represents 21,994 out of the 50 properties every month. Today, applied right up to today, it is actually only 22,159, which represents £443 a month, which is effectively £17 a month extra, which is 4%. Now, did you know when I applied inflation to the start of all these ones and actually put them in, it should have been 34%. So all the landlords in our books for the first 50 properties are actually taking a hit of 30% less rent than what inflation should be. 30% less rent than what inflation should be. I'll just say that again. Every single landlord, the 50 landlords that we've got here for the 50 properties, are taking a hit of 30% less rent than what it should be according to inflation. So then that makes me ask the question, let's look further afield. So
I was just going to say, because that's just a snapshot from our stock, and it's only 50 properties.
I'm going to look at Edinburgh. So I got another letting in Edinburgh. They took 25 properties and they drilled it down. Now they took their average rent when all these people had started of 797 for each property. Now today it's actually 1,048. But if you apply inflation, it should be 1,110. So again, even in Edinburgh, this agent is charging less than inflation by 7.7%, less than inflation. And I thought, I'm going to go one step further, and I'm going to ask another letting agent on the West Coast to actually drill down these numbers for me as well. So Sam Dyer looked at his lettings and had a wee look at his ones as well. And we looked at Sam's, and Sam gave us information as well. And Sam took his first 25 properties that he had on. And what had happened was the rent when he first started out was £498 per month. Okay? Today's rent average is £531. According to inflation, he should be charging £634. Sam is 20%, Sam's landlords are 20% less than where they should be, these rents, compared to inflation.
Compared to where inflation should have them, yeah.
So then that then makes me ask then, what landlords are overcharging everybody?
Yeah, especially if that, I mean, that's across the country, in Scotland anyway.
I mean, I'll be honest and I'll really say it, this shit's just made up by the Scottish Government, isn't it? To justify their rhetoric.
Yeah, I know. There's comments coming in, and I think a lot of people are in agreement with that, especially people that are in the industry and things. It's becoming very apparent.
It's becoming very apparent. The information and the data they've collected to justify their stance is actually inaccurate, or it's too finite. It's too small of a market or too small of a demographic of the overall rental values. Now, I'm going to take this one step further, and I'm going to take this even bigger, and I'm going to try and get Sal to actually, go to their members, their letting agents, and exactly similar thing. And then we're going to start lobbying, and we're going to make it different. Because I don't believe for 1 minute rents are out of control, but especially if rents are a lot less, according to our figures, than what the actual inflation amount should be. So every single landlord, as far as we're concerned, that we've done, which is over 50. Well, look at mine. So we've got round about 150 properties or more than 150 properties that we proved, and they're not, we've not cherry picked these properties. These are properties that we've just put together randomly from the very beginning and actually extrapolated them. Well, actually not extrapolated, just put them to where they should be according to inflation, compared them to where they are right now in terms of the value. And every single one of them is less than inflation.
Yeah.
So who's really overcharging the tenant? No one, effectively.
Yeah. People might say, and obviously they maybe just listen to me break down average rents and how much they've increased over the last couple of years and things, and think, well, there has been a significant jump in average rents things. But it's important to remember that these figures were based on new tenancies and not existing tenancies that are running as well.
You've nailed it on the head, haven't you? That's exactly what it is. We're getting landlords, and I'll say we because it's me, we're getting accused of widespread profiteering, but it's always this devil is in the detail, like what you said. This is all new tenancies they're talking about. This isn't existing tenancies, and the existing tenancies that I'm talking about, which is the greater majority here, because we'll drill down and we'll tell you what the number of new tenancies in each area is for Fife. But I bet it's the same more or less demographic or statistic, or the same split for other areas of Scotland, if not the UK as well.
Yeah, I would imagine it's the same across the country.
So Richard, explain to me a bit more about the new tenancies, not the renewals, and what that means.
Yeah, I mean, a new tenancy obviously is like a brand new tenant moves into a property. That's what a new tenancy is. It's not like a renewal or obviously a continuation of like an existing tenancy is. And I know obviously in Scotland that's not the way of it if there's a PRT in place and things. But I mean, that is what a new tenancy is. Now, the government data shows that most landlords are now not exploiting the mortgage crisis, with 64% of landlords maintaining 4% decreasing rents to shield their renters from the impact of the renewal of the obviously agreements and things. And that's dispelling the notion that they are exploiting the situation. Does that, if that makes sense?
Okay, so let's just look at that again. Government data. This is government data that you've just said. Shows that most landlords, government data shows that most landlords are not exploiting the mortgage crisis, with 64%, you said, Richard, if I'm right, maintaining and 4% decreasing rents to shield renters from the impact of the renewal of their tenancy agreements. Now, we don't have renewals in Scotland, but
no, that's what it says. Remember, in Scotland with the PRT,
So that's dispelling the notion that basically landlords are exploiting their tenants.
Yeah.
Completely. So what do you think Patrick Harvey's going on about in the Greens, the Minister for Tenants? Where do you think this story's come from? What's your thoughts on it? Is this just this bad experience I had with that one landlord that we're still having?
We spoke about this, and I think as well, it's like where they're pulling their information from is obviously it's not a wide enough, like you said, demographic, or they're not taking a big enough picture or snapshot of what is actually happening. And there's comments in here. Maisie has said obviously Patrick Harvey's caused this. When tenants move out, the rents get raised, and that's what we're saying about this is only happening on new tenancies. It's not the existing tenancies that these higher rents are being set. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm trying to read some of them myself actually, and they all make good, valid points, and there. But it's like what you said when you drill down to that, looking at the same government data of landlords setting rents for new tenants. Under half of the landlords, which is about 45%, stated they increased the rent compared to the previous tenancy. So
because they're now taking that opportunity to do that.
Yeah. So 45% increased, which is a lot less than what anybody would think.
Yeah.
35%, a third, kept the rent that they charged at the same level, and surprisingly, 1 in 12, which is 8%, actually decreased the rent. 1 in 12. So that's good 78 to almost 90% accounted for out of these numbers.
Yeah.
So therefore, while the average percentage growth, and well, in Fife, for example, for their new tenancies is 9.2%, the overall average for tenancies is only really 5.5% in the UK.
Yeah. So and that's where I think you need to. That's the important thing here when we're talking about new tenancies. And then you look at all tenancies, including obviously existing ones that are running.
You need to drill that down for regional areas in Fife. You know what?
So you said there obviously for Fife as a whole, you're saying for all new tenancies 9.2%, and then for all tenancies as a whole it's 5.5%. So in Fife, obviously we've got a lot of individual areas where we use as pointers to obviously kind of look at where the market is throughout Fife, because Fife's separated into regions that we use as pointers. So like the Cooper area, for example, we've got that at 14.6%, and then East Newk's at 29.2%. And then we have Glenrothes, which is another one that is 14.2%. We've got Leven at 24.2%, and then St Andrews is 7.5%.
So let me look at this though. I mean, it may seem on the face of it that East Neuk is actually 29%. That's quite a big jump. Why is that in the East Neuk area? Do you think that's driven as well by the fact that a lot of people do holiday lets rather than actually mainstream residential renting?
Yes, although I've seen that starting to change, and people are starting to come away slightly from holiday letting, although it's such a big part of the East Neuk still as well.
But there's a lot. I mean, the data is quite limited, so you only get a certain amount. It's almost like saying Shetland. I mean, when we looked at the prices for Shetland, it implied on the house price register that Shetland had dropped, but lo and behold, Shetland had only sold 3 houses in the month. So in actual fact, the average did drop because it was 3 different types of mix of houses, if that makes sense. So next month it'll probably go up. So when we looked at this, it shows a 29.2% increase. But in actual fact, you'll probably find it's maybe skewed quite a bit because it's a limited number of properties, because we're going down into real finite regions. Leiden was quite a surprising one, but Leiden's been lagging for quite a long time in terms of rental values, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's only just now. I mean, like you say, it's kind of lagged behind for a good few years, and I think now it's starting to come into its own. I mean, Leiden is, and I think should command quite good rental values, and we're actually at that point where it's starting to creep up, as opposed to other areas which have always shown obviously change. Leiden's kind of stayed the same for a lot of years. We know that obviously Leiden's one of our main areas.
And is this shortage of supply? It's actually driving this then.
Yeah. I mean, if I put a property on Leiden at the moment, I'm inundated with people.
How on earth do you think then all of a sudden have we got this shortage of supply? What's driving this market? Because we've never had a shortage of supply before lockdown, really. Because there was at one point before lockdown, I said, I've got quite a few voids. We're going to get these sorted. And then lockdown came along, and then when we came out of lockdown, it was like, oh my God, it's like everything's full. You can't get houses quick enough to get them filled. So
I mean, there's a number of things.
What has happened in lockdown? It's caused this problem. What do you think?
I mean, there's a number of things that contribute to that, and obviously lockdown and the effects of obviously all that. It changed people's way of thinking. It changed people moved around a lot differently. People's needs changed as well. What they wanted and where they wanted to be as well. I think we noticed a lot at the back of lockdown of people exiting the more built up areas like the cities and coming to areas and Fife's just perfect. Even if you worked in the city, I mean, you could commute in and a lot of factors like that. And then I think these all kind of funneled into the situation that we're in now, whereas we're still in the backlog of all that additional demand, but we just don't have the property to obviously sustain that.
I suppose as well, when you look at it, we've got quite a lot of contractors coming to Leven to build a new rail link.
Yeah.
And then you've got the River Leven project, which will be going ahead at some point in time in the future at 30 million.
There's a lot happening in Leven.
And then then eventually you'll have the hostel, which is the backpackers hostel at Silverburn, and that's about 10 million. So you've got 77 million, you've got 30 million, you've got 10 million. So, and then you've got another 10 million for the revitalisation project. So there's no surprise there that area, the rents are going up because there's more and more people needing to rent because it's a short-term basis. Plus the fact, do you think there is definitely a generation rent out there? People are just choosing to rent now.
Oh, definitely. There's been in the last few years, I've noticed it's more of a desire to rent rather than to buy. We've spoke previously about there being so much more easily available to rent a property than it is to try and obtain a property to buy, in terms of the exit and entry and exit fees, the responsibility for maintenance. There's a lot of factors, and a lot of people now they choose to rent, and like you say, generation rent.
Well, we're going to talk about on the Wealth Creation Show on Monday about how to have your rich life.
Yes.
And one of the things I'm going to talk about and how to design your rich life is the fact that, if you're going to live in a property for anything less than 5 years, you're probably better to rent, because the entry and exit costs are far prohibitive in comparison to what it is to rent. And the very fact is you can go anytime you want and you've not got any commitments and you've not got any extra costs in terms of repairs and improvements and everything else to pay on top of it. So
I know, and sometimes when you go through it, sometimes it's a no-brainer. For some people, it's like, why would I commit myself to a property to buy and have all these additional costs and responsibility when you've got such a lot more freedom being a tenant?
But you're not a success unless you've bought your own property.
I know, but that's a misconception as well.
It's true, isn't it? It's true. That's what society thinks. you know, the old school thinking is you're no success unless you've bought your own property and you own your own house. But the reality is, for some people, and I remember when I was younger, it's like we had a property for 2 years and then we'd move on. And when I worked out the cost of in and out in 2 years, then I could have just rented and it would have been cheaper to get to the next one. So it does make sense, and we'll talk about that. Let's pop back to this then and talk about that.
So we spoke about the overall average.
A lot lower than inflation, isn't it?
Yeah. The 5.5% is much lower than the rate of inflation, and I think contrary to popular belief, and landlords' profit margins have significantly dwindled in the last couple of years, and the profits for private landlords are at their lowest since the credit crunch. And this is due to obviously mortgage rates rising, the limited tax relief, and this demonstrates that private landlords are not profiting during the cost of living crisis, which a lot of people do believe, and that's just not the way of it. And some people will say, well, Fife house prices have risen in that time, and yes, that is the case. Yet by the rate of inflation. But obviously not by the rate of inflation, should I say. So in fact, in real terms, their investment has actually gone down in value, if you look at it like that.
In the short term, you know, in terms of how inflation's gone up and how Fife house prices have gone up as well, it is almost like inflation's outperforming there. But in the long term, house prices have always actually outperformed inflation.
Over time. But at the moment,
and I get that completely. And then you've got the cost of capital. In other words, if somebody's coming into the market for the first time as a landlord, they've got to get the proper return on capital. Now, you could argue out there, and anybody could say this, it's like, oh, profiting off a second home isn't right and all the rest of it. But the reality is, we need rental stock, and there has to be a good mix of tenures in our society, because not everybody wants to buy and not everybody can buy, but it's only through their own personal circumstances that that's the case. It's not because there's not enough properties to buy, it's just that they choose not to buy, or they can't buy because they've got poor credit rating and they can't get the funding or the lending. So it's no fault of anybody else's except their own. So that's why rental stock will always be needed. Again, we can come back and argue that, and I'm in favour of this, that the council should have built enough social housing to accommodate more people, with losing 70% of their housing stock since the 1980s. But again, that's a failed policy. It's never been put in place, and that's a lack of a coherent housing strategy by the respective governments, the UK government and the Scottish government themselves, and the Welsh government's experienced the same, and most governments, except the only governments who actually are not experiencing this are the governments in Europe, because most of their stock is actually rented, isn't it?
It's all rented, Well, not all, but like you say, the majority.
They don't buy into the home ownership. They actually see it as a tie, as a you can't exit and you're stuck with it, whether you like it or not. So they actually rent.
It's the same in America. It's quite right. The rental side of it.
So landlords are often portrayed negatively in the media, but are in fact making considerable efforts to provide safe and secure housing for millions of tenants. They're facing ongoing costs and growing costs, increased mortgage payments, which are actually happening right now, the negative impact of the taxation system that discourages investment in the rental market, and these are challenging as well, and further exacerbating the ongoing uncertainty surrounding reforms to the law regarding landlords overall, which makes most people think, why do I need the hassle of investing in the private rented sector? But we've always said private rented sector is a medium to long-term thing. I would actually say today, I would say it's long-term. I wouldn't say it's medium to long-term anymore, because medium returns aren't there anymore. I think it's going to be a long-term prospect, as is most places anyway. Australia is, it's capital growth that everybody relies on to make their money. They don't actually look at the day-to-day income it comes in, or the month-to-month income, or yearly income, and what is called a profit. But now I would refer to it personally as a surplus, because again, like them, I don't really take anything out of the business either. It just goes back in as to provide proper housing and to provide lots and lots of refurbs over the years, because the housing stock needs to be looked after. So there's a lot of appreciation and wealth accumulation in that, and that's fine. But that's what everybody does. And it's called a pension.
Yeah.
I just choose to put my money in property as my pension, whereas other people choose to put it with a provider who'll do in stocks and shares. They'll do it in property and commercial property, and they'll do it in other areas as well. You know, some bonds, some debentures, some on cash deposit. So that's what everybody does. So there's nothing different about this, except the fact that a landlord chooses to specialise in this particular field in private residential renting or HMO or any other aspect, or student letting as well.
Yeah.
With limited options available, you know, what would landlords?
Yeah, I mean, there is limited options available, and landlords have been left to choose between leaving the rented sector, increasing their rents maybe as a last resort, or absorb the mounting costs that they're incurring. And a lot of landlords are doing that. However, the latter is nearly impossible for most individual landlords who lack, obviously, money in the pocket to do that. But there are some that are doing it, and I have seen it. But to address these challenges, the government must provide crucial support to the rental market. And I mean, that's undeniable, in my opinion, and I know it's yours as well, Jim. And
I
that's obviously...
I think they have to provide the crucial support. If they don't continue to try and provide crucial support and stop doing what they're doing, especially in Scotland, then the banks are getting extremely nervous. Now, I know this because I know a case recently where the banks have insisted on more details for property purchase prices because they're now getting a bit edgy about interest base rates going up and about rents being restricted by the Scottish government. So they're now wanting to make sure they've got their numbers right to be able to stress test it at even higher levels now, because they are extremely nervous about funding projects in Scotland for private rented housing. Now that's quite worrying because this is all about limited supply. So if it's limited supply, how on earth are you going to encourage other people to come in if it's done? If it's like that, how are you going to encourage the investment houses to come in and actually invest in that? I mean, Barclays announced that they're going to invest millions, like 500 million in England, and that's fine because, you know, to build 1,000 houses, and that's great, but that's in England. You know, who's going to invest? Who's going to invest in Scotland if you're getting vilified and demonized as a private landlord, and you're more or less getting told you're no welcome? It's almost like we're getting to the point where whatever you do in Scotland, it generates any sort of wealth and capital growth is frowned upon by the government.
Yeah, and I think it's important as well. And I think when the government's concerned, it's important to remember to alleviate the burden on tenants, not landlords. To alleviate the burden on tenants and renters, the government should really reconsider the current taxes which they've designed to discourage landlords from basically providing rental homes for renters. And like we've said that before, it's the tenants that suffer. It's not the landlords. Now I know there's a lot of landlords maybe going through issues in it, but ultimately the bottom of the line is the tenants, where that's where this new legislation and all these tax changes and things, it's them that feel it the worst.
The problem is it is the tenants that suffer out of this hole. Overall, I mean, the landlords have no other choice but to go down the road of you know, getting their hands tied. They've got no other choice of doing certain things. We're now all being told that we need to increase our rents, even though we don't want to increase our rents because we might get a freeze next year. So we need to increase them now when we don't want to, but we have to. And if you want to increase your rents, and I'm telling you, if you want to increase your rents by the 6% it's getting offered now, you have to demonstrate clearly that you've got 12% or more increase in your costs. Now, that 12% or more can only really be demonstrated by the mortgage going up within a certain period of time. And this period of time has been demonstrated as being the last 6 months. So if mortgage rates, here's what everybody needs to know as a landlord, if mortgage rates level off and your mortgage rate levels off for the next 6 months, and you try to apply for a 6% increase in 6 months' time when the mortgage rates have leveled off, you are no longer going to be able to demonstrate that your costs have gone up 12%. So you're in a critical finite window just now as a landlord to get that 6% increase, but demonstrating in the last 6 months that your mortgage has gone up from there to here.
Because just this afternoon had that conversation.
all these increases drop out that equation. So this is one thing that landlords need to know right now. They need to get on their they need to get on their bike more or less, and get pedaling and get, like, if you're wanting to increase your rents because you're way behind inflation, like I've just demonstrated, then you'll need to do it now.
Yeah, as I say, I've just had that conversation this afternoon with a landlord.
So we can't, I mean, God, we can't really, I mean, the tenants can't simply bear the consequences of a dwindling market, and it will lead to further housing hardship, I reckon. Without proper government support, the renters and the landlords, as you said, could face challenges, caught between the rock and the hard place. Housing is the key most important thing. Now, I hate to say it because it's not a good word in Scotland. The Conservatives, the Conservatives have actually said the next election is going to be won or lost on housing.
Yeah,
that's the key.
That doesn't surprise me. I would agree with that statement.
It's so important. It's an important thing. I mean, rather like the NHS, housing is really important. Everybody needs a roof over their head, and everybody needs a wind and watertight housing, and actually secure and safe housing as well. And I would urge all the parties to move beyond the rhetoric and, what they're doing just now in the vilification, and take positive action to actually support the private rented sector. I mean, I know many Fife landlords, and even landlords right across the whole of Scotland and England as well, who are making sincere efforts to shield their renters, for example, against the mortgage crisis is actually happening to them right now. And it's crucial that their contributions are actually recognised for that. And we just said it there. Where we've said it, only 45% have stated they've increased their rent compared to the previous tenancy to the new tenant, and a third's actually kept it the same, and 8% actually decreased it, as opposed to
brought it down. Yeah,
I've actually heard the story as well from over in Edinburgh, from Lindsay. Quite a lot of landlords have actually not increased their rent because they don't have a mortgage, so therefore they don't see the need to increase the rent because the return's still there for them because they've had the property for quite a while. So there's a lot of arguments to that as well. So dare I say, is that one size doesn't fit all then for this legislation? Is that what we're trying to say?
Yeah, because it depends on the individual circumstances whether it has an effect or not.
So what is the way forward then? What is it? What can we? What can?
I think by fostering an environment that encourages investment and providing support to renters, the government then could help alleviate the strain on both landlords and tenants and ensure that a sustainable and fair rental market for all moving forward. That, in an ideal world, that's where we would like to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, and this is on the back of what's coming, and I know Massey's talked about this quite a bit. Is the fact that we've got the EPCs now. The government, the UK government, has already said to them and been quite clear about this, that they don't think they're going to hit the targets, and it's not something they're going to push dramatically into in order to make.
I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, I knew that was going to happen as well. But that's the UK, remember. Is Scotland going to take a different tact? Are they going to force everybody to have an EPC rating? I mean, the lunatic called Patrick Harvey, and I will call him a lunatic because he has no idea what planet he's on and what commercial reality is all about. And the fact that if somebody lands in this country in a private jet, we're going to charge them £1,000 just for landing in a private jet in this country. Okay, so the government lands on a private jet and you're going to charge them all £1,000 to come and see you in this country. Okay, that's a welcome slap in the face, eh? And then the other one as well is we're going to insist that every single house has to have an EPC rating of C. This is the other proposal of C, or it can't be sold. It can't be sold. In order to have that, you're going to have to. Some of them's going to have ground floor heat pumps at £18,000, or it's lunacy to come out with that proposal in the first place. This will be a great idea. It's almost like this guy sits in his wee room and actually just thinks things up to just push everybody's buttons. Now, I'll be honest, it doesn't push my buttons, but it pushes my buttons to the point of view that he has no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that's just don't really have a lot of words to say. Well, I do, but maybe no for on here about the EPC thing. But about the EPC thing and selling it, I mean, that's just ridiculous.
I think the EPCs for landlords as well will be pushed out. I don't
Well,
think.
I could already see that can being kicked down the road, Jim.
Yeah, I think the 2025 target of having new tenancies at EPC rating of C in 2025 for new tenancies will actually be pushed out, or it'll be ignored to a degree. Not many people will actually look at it, and they'll just continue to let it go. I think I can't see we're halfway through 2023 to 24 and then 25. 2 years from now, interest rates going up, people getting squeezed, lack of supply, and it's like, oh, by the way, we've got another thing for you to comply with.
I know.
Let's
add one more thing to that. Do you know, Mark makes an interesting comment there. He says, will the EPC rating only apply to properties sold with a mortgage? So if you were doing a cash purchase, would it still apply? That's interesting.
Don't know. Russell says, would it be worth voting him out on incompetence and insanity?
I can see that.
I could go for that. I could probably prove that, actually. Yeah. Okay, will cash sales be allowed on lower EPC properties, like uninhabited properties currently? Mark,
I don't know.
You've got a very valid point there, Mark. Mark actually says this in the comments. You've got a very valid point. He says, will cash sales be allowed on lower EPC properties, like uninhabited properties currently? That is a good point. There is an opportunity. If this is actually enforced, there's an opportunity there for people that can't afford to get the upgrade in the EPC to do some sort of, you don't sell it to me, but we do a joint venture project on, we will put money into your house, we will refurb your house to get up to an EPC, and we will split the profit at that point. The new below market value system, as he said.
Yeah.
So that would make it even worse. So this legislation Patrick Harvey and the Greens are proposing will make it worse for even homeowners. Why would anybody want to vote for the presiding party? I don't want to say who it is because I'm not political. No. But why on earth would you want to vote for the presiding government, considering the fact that they were the people that actually brought this person in, or these people in, with all these different policies that are now going to hinder our economy and are now going to affect our actual economic stability.
Yeah.
Overall,
I think it's difficult not to get. It's difficult not to get political when you're talking about housing and a lot of the things that we've covered today, and some of the stats, and then some of the proposals that are discussed. It's difficult not to get political, but we try our hardest not to be too political on the platform.
Well, I don't.
Well, you don't.
I don't try at all. I just say what it is.
Yeah.
I just say what I just call it how it is. I call it how it is. I show people what they're doing. It's up to them to make the decision whether they agree or disagree with me, or they're just none of the above. The classic example. I think that's the whole point of what it is. Inherit a castle you can't sell. True, Mark. You've got a great point. Russell says, I can't believe I'm saying this, but as a landlord, this is it. Yeah. This is it. We would be better off governed by Westminster.
Well,
see what I mean? How that has influenced quite a lot. I mean, I know the presiding party right now has lost tens of thousands of members because of
all due to housing.
Yeah, what's happening right now? Lost tens of thousands of members, hence the reason why all their donations are down. They're one of the poorest parties in the whole of the UK. I mean, the Liberal Democrats wipes the floor with them in terms of funding as well. So they're one of the poorest parties in the UK. And I have a sneaking suspicion they are not going to exist in the next couple of years in what their current form is right now because of this. I think this is the beginning and the end for them.
Yeah, I think so as well. JP for First Minister.
No, never in a million years. Never in a million years. Never. Well, never say never. That's it. You say, well, you don't know Michael Heseltine and all that. Michael Heseltine, no, I'm not gonna run for Prime Minister. And then the next week, Michael Heseltine's running for Prime Minister. But no, never, ever. No, I'm not taking on that burden. That's it, guys. Thank you very much for coming on, Richard. I think
no, that was good, Jim, and I think we covered quite a lot of good stats and some points here.
Beyond the shadow of a doubt that through this, and if you've not seen this, please do it on the rerun. I know it's going to be it's going to be easy on Instagram because it's going to be there. I think TikTok disappears. For people on TikTok, if you want to see what these stats are and what that information is and what the show is all about, go to Fife Properties TV on YouTube, and it will be in our playlist for our midweek show. It'll be in our news playlist as well, and it's rents smashed through the £830 a month barrier for Fife, but we are actually talking about the whole of the UK as well at the same time, and actually showing people why. Well, the rhetoric was, are landlords profiteering? I think we've got to the end of this. I think the answer to that is they're not.
No.
So interesting to go through that. And as I say, thanks for coming on, Richard. And until next time.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
It's bye-bye for now.
Hey. Thanks, Jim.